First things first, I basically just want to say, hey, everyone, and welcome. It's Lori, Marketing Manager here at Design Point. I also want to thank you all just for taking the time out of your busy days to attend. Personally, I'm super excited about our PDM for SMB webinar. Judging by the amount of people in the room right now, I can see a lot of other people are also super excited. At this moment, I'd love to introduce our presenter. I have Dan Wang, one of Design Point's application engineers and also PDM Guru. He's a specialist. He does implementations, the whole shebang. So without further ado, take it away, Dan.
Thanks, Lori. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Today, we'll be discussing SOLIDWORKS PDM and how important it is for small to mid-sized businesses. For those of you who don't know, PDM stands for Product Data Management, which is a tool Design Point provides to securely manage your data and your design process. First off, people tend to have the idea that PDM only makes sense for large businesses. Now, this idea is completely wrong. If anything, small businesses need it more since you're more limited with the amount of time and resources to get stuff done. I've seen and personally worked at companies that didn't have PDM. And let me tell you, there's honestly a lot of time that was wasted trying to fix our designs that were broken because we didn't have the software, which really caused us to really miss project deadlines and also issues with manufacturing. We're going to discuss why and how in a bit, but let's discuss the agenda for today. Here's the agenda. We're going to start off with an intro to PDM. We're going to showcase a PDM demo, and then we're going to talk about some presumptions from a SMB perspective, such as convoluted costs, business size, and then we're going to end with questions. Okay, so here's a flowchart that will guide us through this discussion of what CAD File Management actually looks like. The first part is finding the right files and having the right data. Now, what does that mean? Here's a couple of questions to get us start thinking about how this really applies. First off, what information do you currently use to locate files? Now, if you aren't using PDM, maybe you're familiar with the project and you know the folder structure, so you know how to really navigate to that file. Maybe if you know the file name or the part number, you're going to run a Windows search and look up that part number in order for it to search it up. Now, this is great if your employees or your engineers know or remember the part number, but what happens if they only remember part of the description, not the part number? Or maybe you've had some overturn at your company and your new employee doesn't know the folder structure, doesn't know the part number. How do they search for it? And then the second question we want to talk about is really what information do you have once you've found the file? Now we're going to go ahead and dive in and take a look at how PDM actually manages these issues. We're going to jump to a different screen now. So we're just going to jump to our File Explorer. So this is your File Explorer. This is really what you see on a day-to-day basis if you're using a Windows operating system. You have your downloads folder, you have your documents folder, everything you're familiar with. Now, the Vault PDM is nicely integrated into the File Explorer. So essentially, it's another folder on your computer. If you used Dropbox before or Google Drive, it's a really similar concept, but it's a lot more secure than those options. We're going to go ahead and log in to our Vault right now. And we're going to go ahead and click on it, and we're going to log in as the engineer. Okay, now we're logged into PDM or the Vault, and then in here you can see that we have a list of folders, very similar to what you would see in your downloads folder or your documents folder. And within these folders, you have your subfolders. And within those folders, you have more subfolders. And maybe if you dive into where you store your CAD files, you'll have SOLIDWORKS files as well. Great. So we have these files. maybe if you're a customer that has a standardized folder structure, one of the nice tools that PDM has is automating that process. So with a right click and a couple other clicks, you can actually create a new project. So this is creating a new project folder with all the subfolders and all of the default documents that you would typically need for a project, all being created with this template. So we're just going to go ahead and create a sample project. So project name would be, we'll call this SMB, and the customer will be Design Point. The location will be Clark, New Jersey. And description, we're going to say reference PO 25226. We're going to click OK. And it's going to create those folders for us along with those commonly used documents. Now, this is a huge time saver, especially if you have to do this on a very reoccurring basis. So we're going to take a look at this folder. And you can see the same folder structure. And if we jump into quotes, you can see that it automatically created some files for us as well. So created, maybe we use the same Word document to create our quotes, right? So it automatically created that for us, even attaching the same project name within the file name itself. And then just demonstrating a couple of other neat features that PDM has is that there's a lot of integration built into the File Explorer itself. It's no longer a way to just store your information. You can store it securely, and you can also access a lot of important information off of the File Explorer itself. Like you see here, you can preview the document without even opening it. How cool is that? If we look at the Excel spreadsheet, you can do the same thing. You can even navigate through the different sheets as well. And let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like for a SOLIDWORKS file. So we're just going to go up into the root of the vault, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at a couple of CAD files I have stored already. So we're going to go into our projects folder. We're going to go to our first project under CAD, SOLIDWORKS. And we're going to take a look at this part file right here. Okay, so here's the preview. eDrawings is actually integrated with File Explorer, which is another software SOLIDWORKS provides for free. And if we go ahead and click on that, because it is integrated, you can actually preview, rotate, even measure files within your preview. Next up, you have your data card. The data card is basically you extracting data from the file without even opening it. You'll be able to access information that you might need, such as the description or maybe the material type if you're a manufacturing guy. Next up, we have versions. Now, the big part about PDM is that it has version control. Version control means every time you make a change to a file and you check it into the vault, what PDM does is it doesn't overwrite that, which you commonly see with servers or networks that aren't using PDM. In this case, a new version is created, which means you can keep track of all the changes you've made. And you can also go and reference back older versions as well. So you can see here that we have version 2 on our computer, and the latest version is 2 as well. If we right click on the file and go to history, hey, you can see who did what and when. So initially started off with the admin with version 1 at this time. Engineer was working on it at this time in version 1 as well. And at version 2, something changed. The manager was working on it. You can keep track of all the changes within the history of the file itself.
This is one of my favorite features, Dan. It's like no more conflicted copies. Such valuable stuff here.
Exactly, yep. Next part is the bill of materials. Another nice feature is that you can just view the bill of materials without opening up the part itself or the assembly itself. You can see what is contained within the assembly using the Contains tab. which basically, this is basically an extension of how PDM can keep track of your references. Now, I talked about broken references earlier, which is a huge problem small to mid-sized businesses have to deal with if they're not using PDM. Engineers, honestly, they waste a lot of time trying to fix models that are broken just because your data isn't managed properly. With PDM, all the references are managed for you. You don't have to worry about that. That way you can take the time from you fixing all of those errors to actually driving more designs, more projects, more innovation for your company. So there's a lot of time savings here.
Can we actually park on that thought for a second, Dan? You brought up a good point where you're basically saying that there are some instances where, you know, maybe you have two engineers, right? And one of them is working on something, and then the second guy jumps in and he realizes that things are messed up, so he starts fixing everything. And all of a sudden, you know, guy number two is, or gal number two is wasting all this time basically fixing what they've identified that it's broken or it's not to company standards, which I think we would all love if we have people that hold themselves accountable to that. I would also get everyone in the room, the virtual room, to think about what the alternative to that is, which is, let's say that you have an engineer, and when we're small to mid-sized companies, we're so busy that they actually don't fix it because that's how pressed for time they are. And then all of a sudden you're sending things out to production and they have errors. Like, that's a problem, a huge problem.
Exactly. That's a very good point, Lori. So the other aspect of this is that because your models might become broken just because someone made a change to one file and didn't realize it, that could cause an issue for maybe you have standard projects, standard products, and manufacturing just takes those drawings. And if they become broken, I've seen companies where they waste a ton of money having to recreate parts because they're referencing bad drawings. So yeah, that's a really good point, Lori. Let's go ahead and jump to another capability that PDM has, which is the search capability. So within PDM, the Vault, you can actually search for things that Windows Search can't do. So if you don't know the part number for some reason, and you, for example, just know that this is a track. So we're gonna go ahead and look up the description and type in track. And here, lo and behold, here are the 3 files with track in its description. So if you look at the data card, we can see that this is a track, and here's another track as well on description. And with the preview, you can actually figure out what part that actually is.
So sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
I definitely said that the last feature is my favorite. I lied. This one is. This is like the control find really of like all of your data, which to me is amazing because I use Control F for everything.
Exactly.
If anybody else is impressed with this feature, give me a hand raise. Just want to tune in to see who's paying attention on here. Awesome. Wow, there's a lot of you now in the room. Awesome. Love it. It's really interesting that you're showcasing this too, just to bring things back to, you know, small to mid-sized businesses. I think one of the things that people think is, well, PDM is for data management, and I don't really need that. And what you're showing is, that aside, right, we're talking about organizing yourself. Who doesn't need a tool to better organize yourself and make you more efficient? We're probably using a ton of them now. This is just like the holy grail of them.
Exactly, Lori. All right, so jumping on to the next point, there's a nice option here where when you actually do run a search for the files, it actually tells you where they are, along with all the data that you normally get with a file in the Vault. You can also easily browse to that doing a right click and browse to a new window, bringing you to the exact directory, exact project folder that it's stored in. So a lot of neat features just to make your work go a little faster. Let's go jump back to the PowerPoint. Okay, just to re-emphasize, we have data cards, which basically that's where the description was stored, that's where the material is stored that you can see very easily without even opening up the file. And you can also run searches for those details as well. We have the preview window, which gives you that nice model view where you can actually look at the actual file without opening it. And then for your users that aren't SOLIDWORKS users, they can use the same preview to preview their Microsoft Office Word documents, their Excel documents, their PDF documents, their SOLIDWORKS files as well, without having SOLIDWORKS on their computer. And then, like I talked about before, PDM manages all your references, so you don't have to worry about broken references. It also keeps track of what the parent and child to parent relationships are. You also get a nice feature of computed bumps, which means you can see the bill of materials without even opening up the drawing. So these are some of the neat features that PDM has.
Oh, wait 1 second. Dan, I have a really good question for you. Somebody actually asked, does the information Dan is searching on and what appears in the data card come from the custom properties in SOLIDWORKS?
That's correct. It is directly linked to the SOLIDWORKS file. So let's just do a segue. This will be a really cool and quick demo. So for example, we're going to take a look at this file. It's guide drive track sprocket. That's the description. We're going to go ahead and open up that file and see what it says in the custom properties. So here's the file, exact same file, right? So we're just looking at the preview. And then, oh, there we go. Here we go, exact same file, right? So there's an apples to apples comparison. And we're gonna look at the custom properties. And here you go, description, exactly the same. So with PDM, it creates a link between the custom property to the data card, which means every time you update it in here, it will update onto your data card. And then if you make a change to that data card, it will update to your custom properties. So it's a bi-directional link. So there's a lot of neat things you can do with that, but this is just a really quick and dirty example. Okay, back to the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Dan. Back to the PowerPoint.
No problem. Okay, so this second part of file management is controlling design iterations. So here's a couple of questions to get you thinking about what your current process is. How do you currently keep track of different versions of files? I've seen companies that they use the good old rename. So if it's a revision B, for example, they rename the file revision B. Now this is great for SOLIDWORKS, like for individual part files, but when you get to an assembly file with maybe 10 sub-assemblies and then 20 parts below that, it becomes really, really difficult to manage and keep all of those references intact. More often than not, those references become broken. And I'm not gonna talk about that. I've talked about that a lot previously. And then so I'll just go ahead and highlight that issue. Next question is, what happens if you need to use an older version of a file? Right? Commonly, if you're not using PDM, you have to, every time you save, it overwrites the file, right? So it's not easy for you. There's not an easy way for you to keep track of those older versions and accessing them if your data isn't managed. And then also, like, if you want to reference an older version, maybe an older version of part, and use that for a newer version, how do you really update that, right? It becomes quite difficult. It's possible. There's definitely ways in SOLIDWORKS for you to do that. But like, is the time that it takes to do that meaningful? And more often than not, it's not. You waste a lot of time doing that. And your engineers can probably attest to this as well. So let's talk about how that looks like in the PDM environment. So we're going to jump back to our window, our vaults view, and we're going to take a look at an assembly. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump to my projects folder, and we're just going to go into our second project here. All right, great. So we're looking at a light assembly that I've created. So you can see that it previews the light assembly here, and you get the nice eDrawings preview as well. And we're going to go ahead and open that. So I'm just doing a simple double click here. This is just to demonstrate how easy it is for you to use it. Okay, so here is the light assembly. And we're going to take a look at how iterations of a part change can affect the assembly and whether or not those broken references can be easily dealt with, because I previously said that it could with PDM. So let's go ahead and showcase that. So we're gonna say we're gonna make a change to this holder piece. So we're gonna right click on it and open it. Okay, great. So here's our holder piece, and we are going to check it out of the vault, which means, hey, I want to make changes to this. So it's going to give me write access. You might have noticed if you're a savvy SOLIDWORKS user that it's currently read only, and this is
everyone in the room. Everyone in the room is a savvy SolidWorks user.
So the read only means that basically protecting the file from changes. So we're going to check it out so that we have write access. So we're going to click on the file. Oh, let me just take a look at what state it's in. Okay. So give me a second here and change the state of this. Okay. So basically what happened here is it was currently in the approved state, which means if it's an approved document, which means something has been sent from production, you aren't allowed to make any changes to it. I feel like that's a very, very powerful feature, which means if it's already been released, that any changes cannot be made to that. That design is locked, which means we need to change it back to a state basically where we can actually make changes. Let me take a look here. Let's go ahead and log in as the manager. Great. And as the manager, I'm allowed to basically move that assembly from approved to development so that an engineer can work on it.
So again, whether your team is 1 or 2 engineers or 8, right? Not really, size shouldn't be a difference here. You basically are setting parameters and you have just so much more control of the whole process.
Great. Now your engineer is free to make changes. Now, maybe as a small business, you might find this to be restrictive. So all of this is permissions based, which means if your company feels like this is too restrictive, if we set up the software for you, we can go ahead and set it up so that your engineer can push a file from approved, which means it's locked from making changes, to development where an engineer can make changes. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, you set the rules and parameters, which I think you'll get into a little bit later.
Yep. So we're going to go ahead and open that file once again. And here's our file. And then we're going to go ahead and make a change to the holder assembly. Great. And then so we're going to go ahead and check it out so that we have write access, which we do now. And then we are going to go ahead and make a simple change. Maybe we're going to change the color. So we're going to go ahead and change the color to, let's choose red. And then we're going to check this into the vault to make sure those changes are saved, and then a new version is created. So check in. So version 3 was the blue version. and we're going to say change to red in the comments and click check-in. And you can see version 4 is this red version. Now let's make a couple more changes so that I can really showcase what the effects are later.
Just do like one more for the sake of time so we can make sure that we move through everything else.
Sounds good. So checked out this file, and we're just gonna go ahead and make a couple of crazy changes. We're gonna make that, let's make that 100 or well 3,000. How about that? Great. So we have this clearly an error, right? We're gonna go ahead and check this in and see what happens. Okay, and then we're gonna just jump over to our assembly, and you can see broken model. Great. What do we do, right? So no worries here. So with PDM, you can actually keep track of your assemblies as they were built, as per the designer spec. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that's happening. So we're gonna get version 2.
Hey, Dan, I have another question for you.
Go ahead.
Somebody said, I noticed that when he changed the state of the assembly that all the parts changed also. Is that controllable?
That is definitely controllable.
Awesome.
You can actually choose which one you do want to change. In my case, I want to change all of them, but you can basically pick and choose which one you do want to change.
Perfect. And I'll try to get all these questions out. If we don't answer some of them, I'll just make sure that Dan gets them and that we send this after when we send the recording as well.
Okay, great. So here is our original assembly, right? Everything's intact. Even though that we made that really the wrong change, that part, we still have our perfectly as built, as designer intended assembly model intact. Now let's go ahead and see what happens if we want to change it to a red holder. So we're gonna go ahead and go to the holder. And we are going to check it out. And we're gonna get version, give me a second here. Check out everything. Great, and then we're gonna change the holder assembly to our red version. Great, now our holder is red instead of blue, and we're gonna go ahead and check that in. Great, now it's checked in. We have a red version, and if we go back to, I believe, version 2, which was blue, we're gonna get those copies, those correct versions. And you can see, here's our blue flashlight. So this is just basically showing you how PDM can really manage your data properly and securely. Let's jump back to the PowerPoint. Okay, and I'm just gonna highlight a couple of things that we discussed. New version is automatically created, and that change is saved on top of the file in the vault, but as a different version. You can see the full history of that through the comments, and you can use a get operations, which I did several times to get an earlier version. And then the assemblies update automatically when you do the get. So there's, you honestly have fewer files because you're not doing the rename save to Rev B. There's no assembly rework because everything is intact. You can always go back to an earlier version. So a lot of neat features there. So let's talk about the third part, which is CAD File Management. This is basically talking about how to securely manage your files. Now, I've seen cases where manufacturing is looking at a file and accidentally deletes it, or accidentally changes something in a file and saves it. How do we really stop that, right? And so we're going to go ahead and take a look at how how PDM would manage that. Jumping over to our File Explorer, and we're going to go ahead and log out as a manager, and we're going to log in as a manufacturing person. So we're logging off here, and then we're going to log on as manufacturing. Great. Logged in, we're going to go jump into our File Explorer, and we're going to log into our vault one more time. So as a manufacturing employee, I do have access to this account, and we're going to see if it allows me to make any major changes. So we're going to go ahead, go to our CAD file. We're going to take a look at a drawing because, hey, we're going to we want to figure out what's happening with this project, and we're going to figure out to see if we can make any changes to this. So we're going to go ahead and open up this drawing, and you can see that read only. They do not have write access. Now, you might be asking me, hey, can they check it out and make any changes? Let's give that a try. So we're going to right click on this, and you can see that it is grayed out. They do not have write access. Currently, this manufacturing user is set up to only read files, which means they cannot make any changes or edits to any files. Therefore, taking another step in securing your data so that only the appropriate people can make changes to your documents. Great. Let's jump back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so in here you can really fully manage the permissions on who can do what. You can really look at the states and see how those permissions are distributed, which means, which we took a look at before. The manager was able to move documents from one state to another, but the engineer could not. So from the approved to development state, only the manager could. And then there's a couple other neat features, which are automatic notifications, which sends an email if something needs to be reviewed, or maybe you want PDFs to be automatically generated when you send a document to manufacturing for production. It can automatically create PDFs from your SOLIDWORKS drawings. And then also revision control. You can automatically have the revision stamp on your drawings. Let's go ahead and demo that really quickly.
Just giving you a quick time check, Dan.
Okay, great. This should take 1 minute. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and log out because manufacturing cannot make any changes. And we're going to log in as the manager. Great. Here's the simple workflow of basically what's happening in the background. This file is moved from development to pending review to approved, a 3-state process. And we're just going to take a look at that flashlight assembly. Now, maybe I don't know where the flashlight is, so I'm just going to go to light. And we're going to look at vault. Great. So here's our light file, and we're going to go ahead and change the state. Change state, and we're going to take a look at a couple of things here. It's at revision A right now. Change state, send to approved. And let me just go ahead and close this. Okay, and then once these files change from development to approved, the revision should automatically go up. So we're gonna go ahead and look at what happened. So this is, once again, this is straight from the preview. Now change. Now it's revision C. So that's really it's a quick and dirty highlight of how revision control can work and how PDFs can automatically be generated, as you can see in the background. Let's go ahead and jump back to the PowerPoint, and let's talk about some presumptions from SMB. So a common question that we get is, our system is working. Why should we change it? Now,
raise your hand. Hold on. Raise your hand. I want to do a quick little poll here. Raise your hand if you're kind of on that boat. You're like, I'm pretty happy with my process. I kind of don't understand why I would need to change it.
Okay, great. So we had a couple hand raises here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is, let's think about the amount of time an engineer wastes to really fix your data that is broken because somebody made a change to something, and they didn't realize the bigger implications to it. And now you have your engineer who spends maybe half this week, 20 hours of your 40-hour work week, trying to fix a standard product that you basically refined and should not be broken, but it is. And so he has to spend half his work week in order to fix that model. Where think about if you spent that 20 hours working on new projects or maybe new R&D, where your company could really grow and become in maybe 6 months, 1 year, 3 years down the road.
Yeah, I love that response. Yeah, and I think it is probably going to be something that also gets addressed in the next question. What's the next question that we have on here? Oh, just kidding. It's the last question. Let's jump to the last one and then go back to this one, which is the thought of convoluted costs. I actually just dropped a handout for all of the attendees on here. And when it comes to costs, we're kind of going to go ahead and challenge you and ask you if you can afford to not invest in it. So this quick little handout is basically showing you what the real cost of losing data is, which goes back to that notion that you just addressed, Dan. So why don't you dig into this a little bit?
Okay, sure. So another common question is, this sounds expensive, is it? There's 3 parts of this cost. One is hardware, the second is software, and the third is the implementation part of the software. Let me jump through each one. So hardware, people usually think, oh, so with PDM, we're gonna need to buy new hardware. We're gonna have to have a new dedicated powerful server to run this. And I simply say that's not true. There's a couple options here. Maybe if the upfront cost of your server is too high, we do have the option of our partner EpiGrid, which is a cloud hosting solution, which basically they take care of your server and anything IT related to it. And you can host your PDM server on there. The great thing about that is that they really knock down the initial cost barrier. It's for a small monthly fee, much smaller than what it would cost for a new server purchase. The other option, if you're going very lightweight and you don't have that many files or users working in the environment, you can actually run this on an existing machine, maybe your computer, if the hardware spec met SOLIDWORKS recommendations.
Awesome. So that's great. I just want to park on that a little bit. By a show of hands, how many of you knew that you had these types of options? Essentially, we're saying that you can have something on site, but you also have, oh, look at you guys. You're like, yeah, I knew that. I love it. But yeah, you have options is essentially what he's saying, whether it's on premise or on the cloud.
Exactly. Thanks, Lori. Okay, so the second part is software. So PDM is the software, obviously, but there's actually 2 tiers. There's standard and professional. Now, professional has all the features, whereas PDM standard has a lot of the great features. So PDM standard actually comes bundled in with SOLIDWORKS itself if you have the professional or premium version, which means you might already have access to software. You just didn't know about it, or you don't know how to use it, or how to really integrate it to what you're doing at your company. So if you're interested in that, I would say go talk to your account manager about it, and maybe you want to explore what PDM standard is. The third part about
Great
this is
story.
thanks, Lori. So the third part about this is implementation. So with the implementation, we basically come in, Design Point comes in with our expertise in helping many of our customers set this up. So we set up software for you. We also customize PDM. So PDM can be whatever you want it to be. And we can customize it to your company's process and how you do things. And then the third thing is we actually train your employees on how to use it. So we don't set it up and we just let you go. We actually take the time to train your employees and how to use it from an admin point of view and also from the user point of view. So
I love that.
there's a lot of benefits there.
Yeah, and I love the transparency there, where basically what you're saying is, it is a robust tool, so it is an investment, but the reality is, can you afford to lose data, right? Let's start there. Then there's a notion that you have options, right? And basically that you're not in this alone. We take the guesswork out of a lot of that. PDM gurus like Dan are the ones that are doing your implementations, and basically, you set the tone, you give us the guidelines, and we make sure that we set you up for success. So if you guys like the sound of that, hands up.
All right, let's jump to our last question. The size of our business. So as a smaller business, you might be saying, we don't have that many people, what's the point? And what I would say here is smaller is actually means that this is actually more important for you, because you have more at stake here. You have X amount of employees. Maybe you have 2 employees, 10 employees, and they are already being overburdened with the amount of work they have. Now, can you afford to waste time on fixing your standard products or products that aren't managed properly, and have them spend the time to do that and not work on projects that are new? I would say the answer is no. So, I mean, go ahead and let me know what your questions are down below about that, and then we'll address that.
Awesome. I just want to remind everybody, so it is 11:42. We do want to respect your time. I see a couple of different questions here. A couple from Dennis, Owen, Stefano. I'll try to, say them all out loud. If we don't get to them, we'll take this offline and I'll make sure that Dan replies. But just before I get started, we were entertaining the thought of having a roundtable discussion where it's literally just a Q&A for PDM for SMB. If any of you are interested in that, we'll get it set up. Just give me a little hand raise, and we'll be sure to do just that, because I love all the questions that you guys have. Perfect. Love that. Okay. So one of the questions that you have was from way earlier. Sorry, I missed this, Dennis. It's, what if you don't want to create a new version, such as at the end of the day, and you aren't finished with the changes?
Great. So if you don't want to do that, I would say just go ahead and save it on your computer. I mean, it's basically what you do on a normal basis. Go ahead and save, and then when you come back in tomorrow, you continue working. The recommendation there is that I wouldn't really worry about the versions. People often confuse revisions and versions. Versions is just basically another basically milestone in your basically your part file or your assembly file. And it basically, PDM, if you check it in, it'll secure that data, which means you don't have to worry about your computer crashing or losing that data overnight. And then what that does is that it doesn't create a new revision on your drawing. It only creates a revision from maybe A to B when your manager approves it. So there's options there.
Lovely. Another one that I see on here is, we've been trying to set up a PDM vault but have been running into technical issues. Where can we go to get help getting PDM running? Right
Great.
here.
That's a great question. So I would honestly contact Lori or some of our account managers about that, and they can really give you the best recommendation for that.
Perfect. Yeah, as you guys can see on the slide, there's info at design-point.com, but I'll also go ahead and put my email address if you guys have any very specific inquiries, just to make sure I don't lose them. Will implementing PDM included in our Pro license increase our annual service contract cost? I believe that's a question for our account managers. I want to say no, if it's already included in your regular license. We're basically saying you're, included in our Pro license. Yeah, it will not increase that. Sorry if I missed this, but does PDM allow for inventory tracking as well?
So to answer that question, yes, it does. It just depends on how you're doing it. So that's more of a question you would bring up to your account manager, and we'll have one of our specialists really take a look at how you're doing it and whether or not that would apply.
Perfect. Then I have on here, where am I? Are versions finite, i.e. max 999 or such?
They are not finite. You can have as
I'm
many
glad you
versions
understood that,
as you
Dan. I'm like, what?
you can have as many versions as you want. So the only limitation is basically how much space you have on your server. But then again, these days, data is cheap and it's really easy to increase that file size. Now, if you're worried about your versions becoming too big, PDM actually offers integration with basically moving those versions to a different place, or maybe removing versions that you don't want from your vaults. So there's options there as well.
Perfect. Well, it is 11:46. I think there's 2 more questions. I will make sure that they get addressed. I'll literally send them over to Dan right now. He might already be seeing 1 or 2 of them, so he can answer them. I just want to remind you guys that I put my email address in the chat so you can all see that. I would love your feedback. Like I said, I'm the marketing manager here. Essentially, I want you guys to find value in all of the assets, all of the events, be it virtual or on-site that we provide. So let me know what your thoughts are. Noted that you guys are totally interested in a roundtable discussion. I will make sure that we do that for you. And again, I just want to say thanks a million. And because I'm so annoying, give me a hand raise if you found this webinar super valuable. Fantastic. I love it. All right. Well, thanks again. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.